It's 2021 and I think it is the perfect time to look back on 2020 and what it was like being a conservator during the Australian bushfires, museum closures and lockdowns, and also what is involved with putting a museum to sleep. My name is Lucilla Ronai and welcome to the Conservation Starter. If you're a conservator, this will give you some insight to the Australian perspective and what I experienced over the past 12 months, which I think were tough on everyone. And if you're not a conservator, this is an opportunity for you to get a fast and furious summary into a year in the life of a conservator in 2020. 2020, which I'm going to dub the year of the unexpected, started with the Australian bushfires. I was really fortunate that I wasn't directly affected, but I know a lot of galleries, libraries, archives and museums that were. In some cases, smoke came into the museum buildings and set off fire alarms, and some of the smoke even reached collection stores, which is really worrying for the collection items. So conservators worked to extract the fumes and then also do damage control afterwards. I know that collections held by regional galleries and museums were also affected, and then of course people's personal treasures and belongings. So as a conservator, when we're dealing with fire damaged material, we're not just dealing with material that's just been burnt. We're also dealing with material that's been affected by high heat. There's also been affected by soot and dirt and dust, and also often material that's been affected by water and even potentially mold and mold growth from fire suppression systems and firefighting efforts. So there's a lot going on. Private conservators around Australia were part of the efforts to salvage people's personal treasures, and also once the immediate danger passed, there were insurance claims, and then private conservators were then able to carry out work on people's treasures. I'm pretty sure the treatments are still ongoing. It takes a really long time. There are some incredible online resources for how to deal with fire damaged material. A lot of it's online at the Australian Institute for Conservation's website, which I'll pop down in the description below. And also a lot of new resources have been created. For example, an article was written by Vanessa Kowalski, a paintings conservator, on things that you can do if your personal treasures have been damaged by fire. Some of her main tips included, if you can't save everything, make sure you prioritize what you want to be saved. Also, you need to make sure you protect yourself from hazards such as mold spores at all times, because your safety comes first. She also said when you're lifting material to always try and use a support, because the object's probably going to be more fragile than they appear. And she also says retain anything, even if it's unrecognizable, because it could still potentially be restored. And above all, I think the main point she was trying to make in this article is human safety comes first. So for example, if there's a fire damaged building, make sure you check it's safe to go in before you do so. And then we all know what happened in March. So every industry around the world was impacted, but particularly the arts. Galleries, libraries, archives and museums around the world just shut. And for conservators, it was really challenging because a lot of our work involves working directly with objects and being on site. A lot of our maintenance and monitoring isn't possible remotely. We have to be there amongst the collection stores and exhibition spaces, monitoring for pests and maintaining the collection environment like temperature and humidity, and also just monitoring things to make sure there was no pest infestation or like a leak. If those things go unnoticed, it could be disastrous. We were very fortunate in Australia. We were able to stay open for longer than most, but eventually we did shut to the public, though conservators were still often allowed on site. We adapted our way of working, so we alternated being on site and off site and having separate teams so we could stagger our arrivals. We also were able to successfully isolate amongst the collection stores and the conservation lab. We also weren't sure how long that would go on and whether we would potentially be locked out fully, so we prepared to put the museum to sleep. So what is putting the museum to sleep? We'd never done it before, so we quickly found out. We did things like taking certain objects off display, covering things and turning light off to limit light exposure, but also making sure there was regular patrols by security to ensure there was human traffic, just to try and discourage pests, because they like to come out to play when it's dark and there's no humans around. I heard stories from conservation colleagues in the UK where one day to the next they were suddenly told they couldn't go on site and they weren't able to prepare at all. There was some situations where they weren't there for months and wheat starch paste had gone moldy. So if you don't know, wheat starch paste is a conservation grade adhesive paper conservators use. We make it fresh usually every week because it only lasts a week, so months later, not good. Lockdown was also a weird time for me because it actually enabled me to do a lot of work I usually wouldn't be able to do. I got so much treatment done. It was the time that I was able to, for example, wash the Admiral Paris collection. And also the conservation team was able to do a lot of maintenance that otherwise wouldn't be possible on our really large objects on display. Usually with our objects on display, we try and work around opening times so members of the public don't get impacted at all. But with no public there, we could set up scissor lifts, work at heights, clean things, and take the whole day rather than having to rush for an hour or two in the morning or the evening. And then, like all things, the lockdown came to an end and our museum opened back up, so all the things we'd done to put the museum to sleep had to be reversed. For the conservation world, we saw a huge increase on online resources and training and opportunities to connect. And there were things like virtual lab tours, Ask a Conservator Day, conferences and webinars, and just amazing content was being created. I'm pretty sure a lot of it is still available if you want to check it out. I also wanted to say thank you to my conservation colleagues around the world. So many of us have been hit so hard by the last 12 months, but despite that, you've still made it a year of learning and connection for all of us that are so separated around the world. So thank you. For me, 2020 ended with another lockdown. I'm now back in the conservation lab in 2021, and there is a lot to be getting on with. Some of my highlights for 2020 include getting to work on a 17th century globe and even getting it CT scanned at a university, which means x-rayed, so we could see all what's going on in the inside. I got to do treatment on some incredible ginormous lino prints by the artist Alec Topodi and probably put about 700 hinges on them to get them mounted. And I started a YouTube channel. So I think I'm 22 videos in, or maybe 23 with this one. So thank you for joining me with my conservation starter journey, and I will be seeing you in more videos in 2021. Well, not seeing you, but you know what I mean. I forgot to tell you my secret at the end of the week. So my secret for this week is I'm actually terrified of heights, and in my day-to-day work, I'm sometimes required to go up in a scissor lift to 11 meters high. So I was taking a conservation colleague up in the scissor lift with me, and while I'm afraid of heights, I'm also afraid of spiders. So there happened to be a spider hanging off the helicopter we were cleaning, so there was a lot of squealing involved, and I think that's my secret for this week.